alerting authorities that Iran wants to strike the U.S. homeland.
The Iranian forces attacked 3 ships.
Serious Iranian retaliation.
Northern Persian Gulf, southwest of Bandar Abbas. Inside heavily monitored shipping lanes. 5:12 in the morning. 52 fast attack craft move into converging lanes around USS Ronald Reagan as Iranian Army Ranger quick reaction teams stand by ashore. And every command decision now has minutes to prevent a regional incident from crossing the line into open war. The water sits flat under low grey ceiling, and the first light of dawn cuts the Gulf into narrow silver bands between tanker routes, patrol boxes, exclusion zones, and radar shadows cast by coastal terrain. Small boats idle near fishing traffic, larger patrol hulls hold farther back, and shore-based observation posts feed a constant stream of updates into a command network built to compress reaction time. The crews involved believe density, speed, and proximity can create confusion before a carrier strike group fully reorders its defensive geometry. The strategic value of the moment is immediate. Whoever controls escalation in the next 20 minutes controls the political narrative across the entire region. USS Ronald Reagan moves inside a layered defensive posture shaped by doctrine rather than spectacle. Air search radar sweeps broad sectors, escorts hold assigned spacing, helicopters remain available for rapid identification, and every small contact receives classification updates as range, heading, and behavior change in real time. On shore, Iranian military observers watch the traffic picture from hardened positions built into coastal elevations and industrial edges, convinced that congestion, coastal clutter, and civilian route overlap create a zone where pressure can be applied without immediate decisive response. The entire area functions as a test of distance, nerve, and timing rather than a simple display of numbers. In this version of the story, the Iranian Army Rangers do not conduct a raid against the carrier. They function as a coastal rapid response and command support force position to secure observation nodes, reinforce communication sites, and prepare for extraction or containment if the maritime encounter expands ashore. That keeps the frame grounded in military reality without turning the script into an operational assault manual. Alpha element stages from a coastal military compound overlooking the approach lanes. Their task centers on securing a shoreline observation site, maintaining uninterrupted reporting, and protecting the relay chain that links local commanders to the larger maritime picture. Their challenge comes from compression. They must move fast enough to keep pace with events at sea while avoiding any action that appears to widen the confrontation. Bravo element remains positioned near a secondary coastal road network leading toward embarkation points and emergency fallback sites. Their task is to support communications continuity and prepare controlled movement if personnel or sensitive equipment need rapid relocation. Their challenge is uncertainty, because traffic, weather, and political guidance can change faster than ground orders propagate. Charlie element covers inland access routes and watches for spillover risks from panic, rumor, or unauthorized local movement near military zones. Their task is containment rather than attack, preventing a maritime signal event from generating a ground-level breakdown in security discipline. Their challenge comes from visibility. They must remain present enough to deter interference without creating the image of a broad mobilization. Delta element stays closest to the command layer, ready to move as liaison security, site reinforcement, or emergency extraction support. Their task is to preserve command continuity if the confrontation escalates into warning shots, detention attempts, or misread maneuvers at sea. Their challenge is that they operate closest to decision-makers, where every movement carries outsized political meaning. At 5:12, surface search operators aboard the carrier group classify a growing cluster of fast-moving contacts shifting from dispersed movement into converging lines. Iranian boat crews increase speed in coordinated intervals, test spacing, and begin to compress the navigational room around the formation. U.S. lookouts, radar teams, and bridge crews respond immediately by tightening reporting cycles and issuing identification challenges. The result is not confusion but sharper control, because every unknown contact now receives a dedicated place in a continuously updated picture. 3 minutes into the operation, the first line of small craft closes further and attempts to use civilian traffic density as visual clutter. Iranian commanders appear to be measuring reaction thresholds rather than committing to a strike profile. The carrier group answers with disciplined maneuver, aircraft readiness adjustments, and warning procedures designed to signal capability without crossing prematurely into lethal force. The result is a narrowing window in which either side can still claim the movement remains coercive rather than openly hostile. At 5:16, helicopters rise to extend visual confirmation beyond what radar returns alone can provide. Boat formations react by spreading laterally, reducing the appearance of a single concentrated mass while maintaining pressure from multiple bearings. Shore observers report the launch pattern and attempt to assess whether it marks surveillance, deterrence, or the first step in a stronger response. The result is a shift in tempo. The encounter stops being a simple numbers game and becomes a contest over who can interpret intent correctly before range collapses further. 6 minutes into the operation, the closest boats angle inward again and probe for gaps between visual warning arcs and physical maneuver space. U.S. commanders answer with unmistakable signaling, route protection measures, and a visibly tightened outer screen that removes ambiguity about where red lines now sit. Iranian crews keep moving but lose the ability to claim they are operating inside an undefined space. The result is a confrontation that remains active yet becomes more regulated second by second. At 5:20, the entire maritime picture compresses into decisions measured in hull lengths and radio seconds. Some Iranian boats surge, others hesitate, and a few hold back to preserve command options if the front line is forced to disengage. The carrier group does not lunge forward or scatter. It maintains structure, preserves overlapping coverage, and denies the swarm the disorder it appears to seek. The result is that momentum starts to shift from the side-generating movement to the side-controlling reaction. 9 minutes into the operation, shore-based commanders activate backup communications pathways to guard against overload or interruption. Iranian Ranger support teams reposition around key coastal nodes, not for assault, but to secure equipment, maintain reporting discipline, and ensure no local breach of security compounds the naval encounter. Offshore, the boats continue to press the visual boundary of acceptability while the U.S. formation continues to refuse tactical panic. The result is a wider contest of endurance, command reliability, and escalation management. At 5:23, the first major decision point arrives. The nearest boats now operate close enough that any abrupt turn, misunderstood signal, or accidental crossing could trigger an irreversible chain of response. U.S. commanders increase clarity rather than volume, making every warning, maneuver, and visible readiness measure easier to interpret. The result is that the confrontation grows more severe without yet becoming chaotic, which matters because chaos is exactly what a dense swarm hopes to create. 12 minutes into the operation, one subgroup of boats attempts an unexpected lateral shift from a less obvious angle, forcing a rapid recalculation of bearings and approach priorities. The defensive screen responds by redistributing attention without breaking form, and airborne observers help prevent the maneuver from generating a blind sector. Iranian coastal watchers note the reaction speed and understand that surprise through geometry alone will not be enough. The result is the first clear failure of the swarm concept to produce operational uncertainty. At 5:26, command teams on both sides understand that the event has reached its most dangerous phase. If the boats continue to tighten, the probability of a warning action rises. If they ease off too visibly, the pressure campaign loses credibility. The U.S. formation chooses firmness and consistency, not spectacle, and that makes the choice harder for the approaching craft. The result is that the initiative begins to slip away from raw movement and back toward disciplined command judgment. 15 minutes into the operation, several Iranian boats reduce speed just enough to suggest re-evaluation rather than retreat. Others remain forward, preserving the image of resolve while buying time for instructions from shore. Ranger support elements along the coast hold their security positions, keep communications live, and prepare for rapid transition if orders change from maritime pressure to controlled de-escalation messaging. The result is a pause that lasts only moments but changes the entire direction of the event. At 5:29, airborne surveillance, bridge reporting, and outer screen maneuver combine into a single coherent defensive message. The carrier strike group has seen the swarm, tracked the swarm, and prevented the swarm from dictating terms. The boats still possess speed, proximity, and numbers, but they no longer possess uncertainty as a weapon. Shore commanders now face a harder calculation, because persistence may prove resolve, but it also increases the chance of an incident they can no longer contain. The result is a confrontation balanced on political utility rather than purely tactical motion. 18 minutes into the operation, the first visible signs of disengagement begin at the edges rather than the center. Peripheral boats widen their spacing, alter headings by small increments, and create room for a gradual unwind that avoids the appearance of a direct climb down. The carrier group does not chase, crowd, or celebrate the shift. It maintains posture and allows the geometry of the encounter to loosen under observation. The result is a controlled reduction in immediate risk without any side needing to announce surrender at T5:32. The inner cluster starts to thin. Iranian commanders appear to choose preservation of assets and narrative flexibility over final approach that could trigger a harsher response. Coastal Ranger teams receive instructions to hold, secure, and document rather than redeploy aggressively, reinforcing that the moment is being moved back into command channels rather than pushed into confrontation. The result is that the most dangerous window begins to close. 21 minutes into the operation, the swarm no longer behaves like a swarm. The 52 boats remain present, but presence alone does not equal encirclement once coordination loosens, lanes widen, and individual craft peel off into safer vectors. A formation that looked designed to compress the carrier's options now has to manage its own exit without collision, confusion, or loss of face. The result is a transition from pressure event to monitored withdrawal. At 5:35, the US side confirms the tactical reality before the political one. The approach has culminated without breaching defensive control. The escorts retain ordered spacing, aircraft continue to monitor, and the carrier remains the center of an intact protective architecture rather than the victim of a successful swarm. Iranian shore observers continue to watch, but their reporting now concerns disengagement patterns and command messaging instead of breakthrough opportunity. The result is that the event shifts from imminent danger to strategic interpretation. 24 minutes into the operation, the last of the closest boats opens enough distance to restore a more stable maritime picture. No boarding occurs, no hull is seized, and no defensive ring is broken. The Ranger support elements on shore stand down from heightened transition status and revert to site security, communications protection, and after-action reporting. The result is that the encounter ends not with decisive destruction, but with the failure of coercive geometry to overpower disciplined naval defense. At 5:37, commanders on both sides move immediately to the next battlefield, narrative control. Iranian channels can still frame the operation as a test of presence and resolve. US channels can frame it as proof that layered discipline defeated attempted intimidation without unnecessary escalation. The result is that the confrontation survives as a strategic signal, but not as a tactical success for the boats that tried to close the carrier's space. The public version of incidents like this often collapses into spectacle. Headlines reduce command decisions to a single image: dozens of small boats, a carrier, a map, a clock, and the assumption that whoever moved more aggressively must have dominated the moment. That reading misses the real contest. In modern maritime confrontations, the side that preserves structure under compression often wins before a shot is fired. For the Iranian side, the logic behind a large fastboat movement is straightforward. Numbers create visual pressure. Multiple bearings divide attention. Short-range compresses time available for interpretation. Civilian traffic density complicates identification. Coastal support networks reduce the cost of rapid deployment. The theory does not require a strike to produce value. It only requires enough ambiguity to force the other side into a politically damaging overreaction or an operationally revealing hesitation. For the US side, the answer is also straightforward, but harder to execute under stress. A carrier strike group cannot respond like a single ship surprised in open water. It must think in layers. It must integrate bridge judgment, radar classification, airborne confirmation, escort spacing, communications discipline, and rules of engagement that remain lawful under scrutiny after the event ends. Any one platform can move fast. What matters is whether the entire system can think clearly faster than the threat can compress it. That is why moments like this are rarely decided by the most dramatic visual. They are decided by classification quality, signal clarity, formation discipline, and the ability to deny the opponent a misread. Small boats gain power through multiplication. A carrier group defeats that power by converting many moving pieces into one shared picture. Once that shared picture holds, the mathematics of fear begin to break down. The Iranian army ranges in this narrative matter for a different reason than direct maritime strike action. They represent the shore-based depth behind the visible event. They secure observation points. They protect communications. They reinforce command continuity. They prepare extraction, relocation, or containment if the confrontation spills toward land. They do not need to fire a shot to shape the outcome. In a regional crisis, disciplined support forces determine whether a signal operation stays limited or becomes an uncontrolled chain reaction. Military documentaries often overstate the role of impulse. In reality, formations survive these minutes through rehearsal and procedural memory. Crews do not invent responses from scratch. Watch teams know what to classify, pilots know what to observe, escorts know what to protect, and shore forces know what to secure. The encounter becomes dangerous not because either side lacks structure, but because both sides possess enough structure to keep pushing while believing they still control the edge. That edge is where accidents become history. A turn made too late. A warning read as bluff. A radio call heard but not trusted. A craft that drifts too far forward while others hesitate. A commander who mistakes discipline for weakness. Every close naval encounter contains dozens of such branches, most of them invisible in the final footage. Viewers see motion. Professionals see decision trees collapsing in real time. The title suggests something simple. 52 Iranian boats moved to swarm USS Ronald Reagan. Then this happened. What happened, in the coldest military sense, is that a test met a system prepared to absorb it. The boats imposed a problem. The carrier group solved the problem without giving the problem the chaotic reaction it appeared designed to trigger. That outcome may lack the spectacle some audiences expect, but in professional terms it is decisive. Because the most important result is not whether shots were fired. The most important result is whether a large, fast, politically charged maneuver succeeded in stripping away defensive order. In this case, it did not. The boats arrived with compression. The carrier group answered with coherence. The confrontation reached its peak and then began to unwind under observation rather than under panic. That is the central fact such incidents reveal about modern deterrence in confined waters. Power does not always announce itself through destruction. Often it appears as refusal to be baited, refusal to lose the picture, refusal to let numbers alone seize initiative. A swarm can threaten space. It cannot automatically command outcomes. Once the targeted force keeps its geometry, timing, and communications intact, the swarm becomes exposure as much as pressure. And for Iranian Ranger support units on the coast, the lesson is equally stark. In moments like these, their professionalism is measured less by assault than by control. Can they secure the nodes that matter? Can they preserve command lines? Can they prevent a maritime signal event from expanding into a landside security breakdown? Can they execute orders exactly at the speed politics now demands? Those tasks do not make headlines, but they often determine whether a state emerges from a crisis with options intact. The forces applying pressure believed proximity, numbers, and converging movement could break defensive order before response cycles stabilized. The defenders proved that layered discipline, clear signaling, and formation control could absorb a swarm without surrendering initiative.